Welcome to Psychological Explorations with Dr. Michael Axelman.
And Daniela Velasquez.
And John Quazarana.
Today we're going to be exploring a talk that William James gave on psychology to a bunch of future teachers, educators. And it's quite a gem of a presentation. And he talks about the importance in the life of the student and the educator of maintaining a state of relaxation and calm in order to be maximally efficient and productive, successful. Many consider William James the very first American psychologist. There were certainly books on psychology written before William James, but he pulled together this strand of American psychology under the banner of pragmatism, quite influential in both psychology and in philosophy. James is also quite famous for what's become known as the James-Lange theory of emotions. Sometimes you see it as the Lange-James theory of emotions. And it's a theory that really puts the accent on the physiological response as primary. According to this theory, our emotions are mainly due to those organic stirrings that are aroused in us in a reflex way by the stimulus of the exciting object or situation. This is this physiological response. The mere giving way to tears, for example, or to the outward expression of anger, fit, will result in the moment in making the inner grief and anger more acutely felt. So the theory begins with this physiological response, and then all of these overlays, these narratives that get placed upon that, and that's secondary. According to this theory, the primary is the physiological aspect. This moral training of youth, for James, the primary focus of the educator is on conduct. It's outcome of behavior that educators should focus on primarily. And he offers this guidance: pay primary attention to what we do and express, and not care too much for what we feel. Feelings take a secondary place in the Jamesian universe, and consequences, outcomes, the pragmatics rise to the fore. James puts together action and feeling. Action seems to follow feeling, but really, action and feeling go together. And by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not. So he packs a lot into this one sentence here. And this notion that feelings in general are not under the governance of the will, but our behavior, our conduct, our speech is. And that is where we need to direct our attention. The regulation of action. The sovereign voluntary path to cheerfulness. Thus, the sovereign voluntary path to cheerfulness, if our spontaneous cheerfulness be lost, is to sit up cheerfully, look around cheerfully, and to act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. We have to pretend that we're cheerful, and then we become cheerful. He's making it very clear that when it comes to mood, we want to fake it till we make it. Put on the face, work on the smile, work on the attitude, and act as if one were cheerful. To wrestle with a bad feeling only pins our attention on it and keeps it still fastened to the mind. Whereas if we act as if from some better feeling, the old feeling soon folds and silently walks away. Where do we put our attention, our mental focus? James directs us towards putting the accent on the as if. Act as if we're cheerful so that we may become so. William James references this very faithful Christian woman, Miss Hannah Whittle Smith, who wrote several books on this very topic. One of her most famous was Secret of a Happy Christian Life. And William James quotes from her, and maybe not quotes directly, but references her directly in this talk. And he says, let your emotions come or let them go, just as God pleases, and make no account on them either way. They really have nothing to do with the matter. They are not the indicators of your spiritual state, but are merely the indicators of your temperament or of your present physical condition. Very clear focus on letting emotions pass without giving them too much attention. Following emotions can lead us into states of confusion, agitation, anxiety that will grow. And the secret is the mastery of this particular focus. Really thinking in a very practical way, what am I focusing on? What are the outcomes? What are the consequences? How do I relieve myself from this circular way of thinking? So it's keeping the right body posture, the regulating speech, so it's clear without being pressured. Consider, for example, the effects of a well-toned motor apparatus, nervous and muscular, on our general personal self-consciousness. The sense of elasticity and efficiency that results. So this idea of working on the physical aspects, the mind-body integration of the nervous system, putting your focus on that to be elastic and efficient, well-regulated. How can they, and he's talking about the worries here, gain admission to your mind if your brow be unruffled, your respiration calm and complete, and your muscles all relaxed? He guides us that when we recognize that we're in states of tension physically, to put our focus directly on this tension and bring upon us a state of relaxation, releasing that physical tension through awareness, through intention. James focuses during this lecture for a few paragraphs on kind of the American psychology en masse, kind of the cultural psychology of America that he characterizes with tension, intensity, and agony. The American overtension and jerkiness and breathlessness and intensity and agony of expression are primarily social and only secondarily physiological phenomena. They are bad habits, nothing more or less, bred of custom and example, born of imitation of bad models, and the cultivation of false personal ideals. Bad habits, nothing more or less. So this idea that we need to be more efficient, quicker, faster, leads us into this life of breathlessness, of intensity, that leads us into the cultivation of bad habits that support that whole process. Your intense and convulsive worker breaks down and has bad moods so often that you never know where he may be when you most need his help. He may be having one of his bad days. Well, anybody who's ever worked in an office, how many times do you hear that somebody is having a bad day and using that as an excuse to do less work? It's so common. It's hard to believe. So how do we examine our own habits, our own attitudes, become observant of our body and muscular tension? James asks us to put all of that under observational review. He contrasts that attitude of tension with the relaxed and easy worker who is in no hurry and most thoughtless most of the time of consequences. Who is your efficient worker? And tension and anxiety and present and future all mixed up together in the mind at once are the surest drags upon steady progress and hindrances to our success. Relaxed, not in a hurry, thoughtless about consequences, because they're just attending to the task at hand. They're in the present moment, doing what's required. Chop wood, carry water, very similar message, just being present in that moment in a relaxed way. James amplifies this very important point of the deleterious effects of strong feelings, very charged, highly reactive emotional states. And the law is this, that strong feelings about oneself tends to arrest the free associations of one's objective ideas and motor processes. We get the extreme example of this in the mental disease of melancholia. And the same is true with joyous emotions about the self, which also stop the association of ideas. So we see that strong emotions on either end of the continuum preoccupy us, take over our mental process, and move us away from creative, efficient thinking and the association of ideas. James brings up this topic of indifference. I wish more psychologists actually took up this thread and developed it. It's so rarely do you hear this idea coming up as a recommendation. So, and I quote, "Who are the scholars who get rattled in the recitation room? Those who think of possibilities of failure and feel the great importance of the act. Who are those who do recite well? Often those who are most indifferent. Their ideas reel themselves out of their memory of their own accord. This idea of a neutral place, focusing on the muscular tone of relaxation and being free of worry about outcome, just letting it go. Similarly, James, at the closure of this essay, gives some test-taking advice. And I quote, "Prepare yourself in the subject so well that it shall be always on tap. Then, in the classroom, trust your spontaneity and fling away all further care. If you want really to do your best on an examination, fling away the book the day before. Say to yourself, I won't waste another minute on this miserable thing. I don't care an iota if I succeed or not." Say this sincerely and feel it, and go out and play, or go to bed and sleep. And I am sure that the results the next day will encourage you to use this method permanently. This same idea, adapting this indifference attitude and also living it. You're bringing it into action by beginning to play. Bring your focus off the activity. Go to sleep. You're not just thinking it, but you're doing the acts of indifference. And in closing, he makes recommendations very directly on the way to do it. And the way to do it, paradoxical as it may seem, is genuinely to not care whether you are doing it or not. Is genuinely to not care whether you are doing it or not. Then, possibly by the grace of God, you may all at once find that you are doing it. And having learned what the trick feels like, you may again, by the grace of God, be enabled to go on. So this is the wonderful paradox that underlies James' gospel of relaxation. Thank you for joining us today, and stay tuned for part 2 where we have a discussion with Daniela and John about this wonderful topic.